If you ask me, we humans have a bit of an obsession when it comes to destruction. Throughout our history, from the legends of Ragnarok and Armageddon, to the tale of Cillian Murphy receiving a Sloppenheimer whilst developing the atomic bomb, our interest in things that explode has not gone away. So it's no surprise that the desire to develop superweapons has followed us into that most intellectual and esoteric of human pursuits, video games. But I assure you, dear viewer, despite the comedic and somewhat irreverent tone of this narration, the subject of this video is no joke. Today, I will be discussing a true weapon of mass destruction, the most devastatingly powerful item ever to exist in the world of Warcraft. I'm Vulgrin, and I invite you to join me, my friends, as I recount the bizarre and frankly hilarious story of the Martin Fury incident. It was April 2009. World of Warcraft was fast approaching its all-time climax, with a population of approximately 11.5 million eager players, all working their way towards one ultimate goal: defeating Arthas, the Lich King, possibly the most iconic villain in the entire franchise, and the primary antagonist of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, which was in full swing at the time. But the prospect of an Icecrown Citadel raid, in which players would finally face off against the Dark Lord of Northrend, was still far in the future, and in April 2009, everyone's focus was on a new patch and another raid that had just been released that very month. A very special raid indeed. Ulduar is considered by many veterans of World of Warcraft to be the greatest raid ever designed by Blizzard. A sprawling Titan prison facility with both outdoor, indoor and underground areas, it boasted a strange and unique blend of colourful vibrant themes and mechanical marvels, and came complete with 14 bosses, including one secret boss for players to encounter along the way. In short, Ulduar is a marvellous singular raid which brought a refreshing change from the heavily necromantic themed content which dominated Wrath of the Lich King. I just wonder how much LSD was consumed during its development. Ulduar came with a novel feature too, additional hard mode versions for many of its bosses, providing an extra level of difficulty for bolder, more seasoned raid teams. But there was more. Raiders in search of an even greater challenge could seek to complete a number of achievements tied to different encounters in the raid, which would require players to perform certain feats during these encounters, often making them much more difficult still. Raid achievements have become a commonplace feature in World of Warcraft from their introduction in Wrath of the Lich King, but Ulduar had a staggering 70 achievements tied to it, to this day the highest number of achievements for a single raid in the entirety of the game. Some of these achievements were formidable, and alongside the hard mode bosses, they presented a real challenge to a lot of the more mediocre guilds progressing through Ulduar. So the stage is set for our story. Wrath was booming, Ulduar had just been released, and players were eager to explore its depths. Now it's time for us to introduce our protagonist, our main character, the hero of our story. Kinda. The word anti-hero can be defined as a central character in a story, film or drama who lacks conventional heroic attributes. Think of the Wild West gunslinger who kills and robs yet still attracts our admiration and respect. Or a superhero who uses their powers not for altruistic purposes but instead to fulfill their own personal agenda. There have been many anti-heroes in the history of World of Warcraft. You know, I'm something of an anti-hero myself. But the main character of this story is a true anti-hero, a gnome who risked everything for personal glory and for the power of friendship, who broke the rules and paid the price. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Karate Chop. Karate Chop was a gnome warrior active on the Vecnalash US server at the time of the release of Ulduar, and he was the master of a guild named the Marvel Family on that server. But this story doesn't actually begin with him. Instead, we turn our focus to another player named Leroy Speltz, also active on Vecnalash US. In April 2009, whilst many other players were eagerly preparing to delve into Ulduar and unravel its secrets, Leroy was embroiled in a bit of a drama and had a secret all of his own. 4 months earlier, in December 2008, he had been the victim of a terrible crime. Someone had hacked into his World of Warcraft account.
Oh my God!
How this came to be remains unknown to this day. Perhaps he let his stupid younger brother use his account, always a risky move. Or maybe he used the same username and password on a shady porn site. Who am I to guess?
Naughty.
What matters is that his account was hacked, and in true 2008 fashion, the culprit was absolutely fucking merciless. Leroy's characters were either transferred or deleted, his gold and useful items stolen along with his self-esteem. Even Leroy's guild was not spared, as due to him being an officer, the hacker was able to make full use of the privileges this rank afforded to Leroy, and promptly ransacked the guild bank.
Oh God, that is...
Like any sane individual watching his life unravel before his eyes, Leroy did the only sensible thing. He went to the authorities. To a normal person dealing with a real-life situation, this would of course mean involving the police, but as we're talking about theft in a virtual world complete with orcs, elves and giant rideable chickens, customer support would have to do. Leroy made a ticket and waited patiently, knowing in his heart that soon Blizzard would respond, his account would be restored, and he would be able to get on with his life, enjoying the game he loved. What actually happened? They didn't, it wasn't, and he was fucked. For a while, anyway. Blizzard didn't respond to his ticket, and Leroy was left to pick up the pieces, putting his shattered account back together and getting on with the Wrath of the Lich King expansion as best he could. Until about 4 months later, when he opened a new ticket in relation to a loot issue he'd been having in the Obsidian Sanctum raid. This time, Blizzard responded, and the GM would eventually ask him about his hacked account. When Leroy logged in on April 19, 2009, much of the damage had been repaired, with items and characters restored to his account, along with something else. Sat in his bags was a shirt. But not just any ordinary shirt. Firstly, it was an artifact quality item, something that is pretty much unheard of when it comes to items obtainable by players in-game, prior to the Legion expansion anyway. But far more interesting than its type was the shirt's effect. Use. Kills all enemies in a 30-yard radius. Cheater. What exactly went through Leroy Spelt's mind when he saw this text? Did he genuinely think that this item had been intended for him? Did he consider contacting the GM to make them aware of their mistake in sending him the shirt? We'll never know for certain, but what we do know is that Leroy decided to keep this shirt, which had the peculiar, unique name, Martin Fury. GM items had always existed in World of Warcraft, presumably to test elements of the game before general release, though I personally like to think that in those halcyon days of early WoW, when the divide between players and developers didn't seem so great, that these items were one way for GMs to demonstrate their godlike power to the mortals of the player community. And hey, that's really fucking cool. Whatever the reasoning for their existence, these items were never intended to fall into the hands of ordinary players. And just like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, Leroy Speltz had become the fateful owner of just such an item. There was, however, a catch. The shirt was a plate item, meaning that Leroy, maining a character unable to equip plate, couldn't use it himself. Now, if it had been me, and considering what he did next, I would have just mailed it to an ol. There's no way I would be letting such a powerful, unique item fall into anyone else's hands. But hey, that's me. I steal the last slice of cake from my girlfriend when it's a cake that she has taken the time to bake for her own birthday. I'm a greedy bastard. I play a rogue, you should know this by now. But Leroy, it seems, was a good guy who valued friendship and loyalty more than personal glory. Maybe it was a feeling of responsibility for the hacking incident and the ransacking of the guild bank. Or perhaps it was because he knew that it would likely benefit his friends more, but Leroy decided to give Martin Fury away, trading it to the master of his guild, a gnome who, being a warrior, could make full use of the plate item. Yes, you guessed it. Leroy's guild was the Marvel family, and his guildmaster was Karate Chop. And our boy Chopper was ready to receive this gift. He knew just how to put it to use. To quote the Escapist article about the incident, he went out and kicked ass. Karate Chop was eager to use the shirt in Ulduar, and to summarise the merry adventures that he and the gang went on that fateful night. First they killed Ignis, just to test the shirt out. They then exited the raid and reset it to Heroic and blasted Flame Leviathan. 4 towers version, that's the hardest configuration of this encounter for the uninitiated. You might think that at this point, having had their fun, the raiders would have carried on with their night without using the shirt anymore, right? Karate Chop and his raid team used 14 charges of the shirt that night, and considering that it deleted any enemy in a 30-yard radius on use, we can safely assume that this number likely equates to the number of bosses sent to the Shadow Realm that evening. Indeed, not only did the guild get Ulduar kills mentioned above, but they also got their first Malagos and Sartharian 3 Drake kills, which for those of you not familiar with these bosses, were in 2 different raids outside of Ulduar. They actually killed Sarth 3 Drakes, considered by many to be the hardest raid content in Wrath prior to the release of Ulduar, on both its 10-man and 25-man versions, because if you're gonna cheat, you might as well go full bore, right? It was a fucking massacre. The life expectancy of raid bosses in Northrend decreased by orders of magnitude. Arthas himself was probably shitting his pants in Icecrown. On that night, the Frozen Throne became the Brown Throne. And along the way, during this path of carnage, the team picked up many achievements, including 8 server firsts and a world first? What the fuck? With such explosive and devastating results, it was only ever going to be a matter of time before there were consequences. Now if you ask me, Karate Chop and the boys fell into the same trap that has ensnared many a criminal over the years, both real and virtual. They didn't launder the money properly. What do I mean? Well, here's an analogy. If you moonlight as a level 100 mafia boss making fat stacks on a daily basis, but work a day job at Subway making sandwiches, then your friends, colleagues, and more importantly the IRS might find it a little bit sussy when you rock up to work in a Bugatti and live in a $5 million mansion. Trying to claim that you're just that good at making sandwiches is probably not going to be too convincing. The same applies here. The truth is that Karate Chop and his guild were not top level players. In fact, they'd only just cleared Nax Ramus a short while before this incident, so for them to suddenly start crushing everything they came up against in a brand new raid just stuck out as unusual and unexplained to everyone else. In one night, they went from being a completely unknown entity, struggling to even keep up with the current content, to becoming one of the most formidable and terrifying raiding guilds on the face of the fucking planet. If they had wanted to avoid such obvious scrutiny, what they should have done was use the shirt sparingly, spacing out the charges and saving them for encounters where a boss was getting low on health, perhaps at 5% or so, but would have wiped the raid if they didn't have the shirt. But if you believe Karate Chop's own account of the Martin Fury incident, he and his boys saw the whole thing as just a big joke. They weren't trying to be deceitful or exploitative, they were just having a laugh, and they weren't trying to hide it. Not sure if I believe that one, considering the sheer amount of bosses on multiple difficulties and in multiple different raids that got blown the fuck out that night, but hey, that's what he said. And if you thought that the IRS was obsessed with investigating anomalies, then you have never encountered the raging horror that is an angry, devoted WoW player who thinks he's being cheated. Needless to say, it wasn't long before the antics of the Marvel family started to attract the attention of outside forces. When the news spread and Blizzard themselves became aware of the situation, they took action. By which I mean they struck down Karate Chop and his guild with biblical apocalyptic force. It was as though the guild had been on the receiving end of a gluteus maximus dropped on them by Boomer from the Super Duper Sumos. Everyone in the raid team who had participated in the affair was given a 24-hour ban on the fucking spot, simply for being complicit in the raid. It didn't matter what you'd said or done, if you had been in that group, you were getting banned, just for showing up. But that wasn't enough for Blizzard. They imposed 24-hour account suspensions, not just on the raiders in the Marvel family, but on every single guild member who had been online at the time of the raid, regardless of whether they had participated in it or not. I find this particular punishment both extremely harsh and fucking hilarious. You can just imagine little Timmy, who joined the guild as a social the day before this all went down, leveling his first character, a level 5 dwarf hunter, through Dun Moreau, killing boars and yetis and shit, only to suddenly get banned by Blizzard. You know that poor kid went to bed that night terrified that the fucking FBI were gonna raid his family home or something. So harsh, Blizzard, but so fucking funny. Nevertheless, in the grand scheme of things, these players are the ones who got off lightly. The real punishment would be saved for the ringleader, for Karate Chop, the guildmaster who had worn and used Martin Fury during the raid. He would be banned also, but not for 24 hours, or even a week. No, Karate Chop received that most terrible and forbidden of punishments. He was permanently banned from World of Warcraft that day, paying the ultimate price for that one night of glory. Personally, I think it's really goofy and charming that in his Engadget interview after this whole business, Karate Chop seemed most concerned about the fate of his guildmates who received temporary bans just for being on the periphery of the whole event he had orchestrated. He comes across like a commanding officer getting court-martialed and bravely taking full responsibility for his transgressions in an effort to spare his men from unjust punishment. This is what I love so much about online games and their communities. The line between roleplay and reality blurs, and you get crazy, hilarious stories like this. Ultimately, as far as I can tell from my research into this affair, Karate Chop's ban remained permanent. It seems he exited the stage like a true anti-hero, stating his intentions to leave the game and try something new, before vanishing into the sunset. He didn't kick up a fuss, he didn't try and act like he was innocent. He was just a gnome looking to have a good laugh with his mates. And I, for one, can't argue with that. Wherever he may be, whatever he's doing now. Karate Chop, from one Joker to another, I salute you, my friend. And what about the item which caused all this devastation in the first place? That led to such salt within the community and resulted in temporary bans and the permanent exile of one player? What happened to Martin Fury? Well, as you might expect, Blizzard had no intention of letting something like this happen ever again. But they acknowledged that in a game so large as World of Warcraft, with customer and staff interactions taking place constantly, the chance of some rando receiving the equivalent of the nuclear launch codes in the mail whilst having his lost Silverleaf and Silverskin mackerels returned to him was a possibility. To prevent the shirt from ever falling into the hands of rogue agents again, Blizzard not only removed it from the game, but they changed its effect. No longer would it kill all enemies in a 30-yard radius of the user, but instead the item text read, "The caster commits suicide, instantly killing themselves." I think there's something questionable about Blizzard making an item that can be used by a player to commit suicide. A bit dark, honestly, especially given that they could have simply given it no effect at all, or at least got the grammar right, but who am I to judge? There is certainly an irony to changing the shirt's effect to kill the player on use, considering that Karate Chop's account was perma-banned for using it, effectively killing his WoW experience. The man made the ultimate sacrifice for our entertainment. The least Blizzard could have done was name the item after him, seeing as the new effect so accurately mirrored his own fate. They could have called it something like Karate Chop's Shirt of Self-Sacrifice, or Gnomish Vest of Unlifing, something of that nature. Just want to think about, Blizz. You can send my royalty check in the mail. Stories like the Martin Fury incident are abound in World of Warcraft and other MMORPGs, and getting to make this video has been a blast. If you enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. There will always be more where this came from. Let me know what you think about the Martin Fury incident. I read every comment and respond as much as I can, so I would love to hear from you. Until the next episode, guys, be well, have a great day, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.